I'm gonna hit it. I'm gonna hit it. See what happens.
Sweet. Are we bandwidth protected, Brian, or are we gonna lose you like 30 minutes in?
I'm literally starting to quit all my apps right now, so nothing else is touching the internet.
Yep.
I'm closing literally everything. It's just going to be us and the live streaming software.
Zen, let's go.
Gorgeous. Yeah, Cam, thanks for fucking setting this up, man. This is exciting.
Thank you, dude.
Oh, yeah, very easy. I feel like the hard part is like in 20 minutes where we have to actually like appear presentable.
I don't think we have to do anything different.
We are, Cassie's dealing with dumber fucks than us, I'm sure.
Constant, bro. That's a very good way to put it, I think.
I see us on the stream, Brian, on Hires Up.
Yeah, we are live.
Good.
I tried doing a little heat map thing. If it's too distracting, I could turn it off as well, by the way. I just do the regular solid color. All right.
That's cool.
I hear us.
Hold that shit up.
It's basically just an enlarged version of the chat or the video.
I fuck with it.
That reminds me of when you had photo booth on your Mac back in like 2008.
Exactly.
You know, it would do like that color inverse effect.
It's good.
It's the hot girl's favorite filter, man.
We're on our hot girl shit, bro. 2026.
Internet culture, baby. Let's go.
I see a fan.
Jerk around to that.
Jerk around to that, bro.
Sorry.
Not the jerk around callback already, dude.
It's got that potential.
Did the loading thing work for you guys at all? I'm noticing that's like it loads too fast, basically, so you can't see the running horses in the background.
It's quick. You get a little tease.
Yeah.
But yeah, it which is maybe cool.
Yeah. I was wondering because I think last week I was talking to John. I was like, should I have it at least maybe like minimum play once, even if like the loading is shorter? You know what I mean? Like force it to just loop at least once. But I don't know. It's like a nice to have, not really a mandatory thing.
I think that's a nice to have. It is still a nice detail though, even as a quick blip. You know, because it's thoughtful. You know that it's thoughtful, which is cool.
It's crazy how I made that. Honestly, I think I shared the original Midjourney video with you guys like ages ago. It was like blue.
Yeah.
And then I basically bought this tool that converts things into Lottie video, essentially, that I'm able to use on websites. So I ran that video basically through that generator. And they have like a couple different styles. One super basic one, they obviously have like the ASCII style. But then they had this one, it was like, that I was like, oh, okay, it's a little bit more subtle. I feel like ASCII maybe is like getting to a little bit to like the everyone's doing it right now vibe.
I think you're right.
So then I did that, and then I noticed they had a color changing feature because it was blue originally. So then obviously changing it to green made more sense. But again, that's up in the air too. Heat map, we might have to do that color palette.
Probably wants to be heat map. You're right.
Interesting.
You're fucking right. Okay, I'm gonna pull up.
All right, reactions at work.
That post. We got some engagement on that post announcing Cassie, which is cool. And some cues. Maybe I'll write them down. What is the ideal version of Farcaster that Cassie envisions? Yeah, can I get the TLDR of Quorum v. Farcaster for someone that had the brain capacity of a 5-year-old? Honestly,
That's our streams That's what we need.
Yeah.
That's what we need.
Yeah.
That is a question in the exact voice that we would probably ask it. What's the future of Quorum? What's its purpose, vision, and plan? What's the next exciting thing happening on either Quorum or Farcaster? Is Cassie okay with me low-key crushing on her?
Oh.
Uh,
She's got fans.
Maybe we'll lead with that one.
I'm gonna also paste some in chat. I circulated it in some group chats, and so these are some that I got.
Is there any sort of structure that we think works here, or
Someone should probably take the lead of the three, like to feel that welcome Cassie, that kind of vibe.
I kind of feel like Cam, right?
I'm happy to do that.
I'm mad at it. I'm not mad at that.
I was thinking like how we can probably kick it off is like with her background and like association with Farcaster, because I know that she worked with Farcaster at some point.
Yeah.
And then the original Farcaster teams no longer work. So like, yeah, just kind of like starting with the open-ended, like, how did you end up working on Farcaster stuff? What was your inspiration? Like, leading up to now, kind of.
Yeah.
Agreed. Because I'm interested. You know,
Yeah,
like
same.
that's
There's
how
a lot of lore there.
I've been thinking. Just like, well, what I want to know who Cassie is, just, like selfishly. You know, this is our stream. Let's get the info we want. You know what I'm saying? Just like get to know her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then like, I think without even getting into the details of like the Farcaster token yet, like maybe something like, why have all social like monetization plays failed to date, in your opinion? And like, why is this one kind of going to be different?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because there's been a lot of attempts. Like I've made some attempts myself too. So it's like, I think that there's like a lot to talk about there. And then like, yeah, then we can kind of like peel off jokes and like have fun with it. Like it's not serious, you know what I mean? It's just kind of like, so that's like, and then that kind of like ends the looking backward, and then we kind of shift to like the looking forward stuff.
Yeah, I feel like we could probably fill the whole fucking time without even talking about a token, you know? But
Yeah.
I think that's what people want to hear about is the token, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you guys want, I can also, while the conversation's happening, on the chat, if people ask questions, just so we're not interrupting people, maybe pull the good ones out to the side or something like that as the chat kind of like keeps going.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Totally.
Maybe I'll post right now and get people to log in.
Is that Anon you, the one who's on the chat right now? Any of you guys? There's an Anon right now that went on.
Quorum is a privacy using triple rat chat.
I guess it's none of us because we all have
Hello,
usernames.
welcome. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not
welcome,
smart
guy.
enough.
We'll go.
Cool.
Are we live?
Yeah, we're live. We could put the whole screen on too if you guys want. We don't have to necessarily be on.
Okay.
There's 9 people in here, by the
Yeah,
way.
thanks for chatting. That's cool. What? And on 910-363-6494. Fucking legend.
Everyone's Anon. We just be like, yo, thanks, Anon.
Thanks,
And throw heart emoji. The reactions.
And it also means they've worked out the sound, which is good.
Oh, yeah, true. That means they're a repeat viewer. They must be.
It's a fucking legend.
Reveal yourself.
Yeah.
Airdrop incoming. Don't worry. Let me log in.
T-10.
Yeah, well, anything else like top of mind that you think is interesting about this, or really kind of just seems fairly chill?
I mean, I'll definitely like kick it off, and then like I can kick it off, but like I really encourage you guys to just like take it wherever you want to take it. If there's empty space, I'll be sure to fill it with like I got plenty of questions, but like would really love for it to be more just like a conversation.
Down.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we're probably all
Yeah, I'll definitely
on
hop
the same page there.
Free license to jump into any stand-up material you've got. If you've got like a tight 60 seconds, just jump in.
Attack 60, bro. That's fucking awesome. Do you guys like think about stand up in your head? Like, do you have a routine if you were put on the spot, like right now? Like,
Absolutely not. No way.
Yeah, no way.
No.
Although me and my partner, me and Bonnie, for a while we had a I don't think we even had a name for it, but we would basically strongly suggest random toasts. So if you were like drinking at all, whether it's alcohol or not, you're just like, time for a toast, and then you'd have to just like freestyle a toast off the top of your head for anything really.
Okay, what do you got?
It's a tough muscle. It's basically freestyling, which I'm also not good at. So you kind of have to like, all right, what's going to be my style? For a while, when the trend kind of started dying down, was when we started going to like the normal stuff, kind of like, what is it? If you can't come in her, come on her. What's that toast that everyone says?
Is that what everyone says?
Yeah,
bro?
there's one that I find a lot of people said at one time where it was like, here's to love and here's to honor. And if you can't come in her, come on her. That's what it is. That's what it was. A lot of people said that. And I was like, damn, this is an inside joke, dude, that I'm not a part of.
It was a meme on TikTok for sure. Yeah.
Oh.
What is it, John?
It was on TikTok. I remember seeing it. Well,
Okay.
I probably got it late on Reels, but I've seen. I think I've seen the original video of the guy doing that, like with his whole body, like lifting some can in the air, like the people around him, like.
There's energy behind that, bro.
So, yeah, it does work, and the fucking laughter, dude, is just, what kind of toast do you want to be? You know, profound, comedian.
The one I always remember from Peaky Blinders, she says, "May you be in heaven a whole half hour before the devil knows you're dead."
Ah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Wow.
Beautiful, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like that one.
Or from Magic Mike, "May our children have very wealthy parents." I do. Yeah, I watched Magic Mike.
Sick.
1 and 2.
That's my way. Why not, bro? Oh yeah, I was gonna post. That's what I was doing.
I think I tagged you in a post. Or
Did you?
I tagged Higher Zip in a post.
Okay, good. Good. I just logged into the account.
Is the chat still working? Is it just my computer bugging out? Now I'm Higher.zip. Can someone else just check?
Let's see.
Good cue. Good cue.
Yeah, it just worked for me right now. Can you guys see that? F.
Mr. Frank? Oh, Mr. Frank is anonymous. They changed their name.
Yo, what up, Mr. Frank? Or Frank, maybe. Mr. Frank. Monsieur Frank.
Best pizza spot in my hometown growing up, Mr. Frank's.
Wow. Crazy that they're in the chat right now.
Mr. Frank, what's the recipe?
Okay. Let's ride up into hire.zip and chat with us live. Chat with us live. See, that's cool.
True.
Log in to hire.zip to chat with us live. Man, posting is hard.
John, I don't see your message, John.
Go on. You see my message or what?
No, I don't.
I just can't. The chat won't even appear for me right now. Like, it won't even, it's not loading or something. I can see the stream. I just can't see the chat.
Now I see it. Another Anon.
That's me.
Oh.
As long as it's working for other people, that's a good thing. It's not the whole chat. It's just whatever funky business is going on with my internet.
Are you logged in?
Yeah.
Investigating.
When we get
I'll log out. Maybe I'll log out and log in again, see what happens.
Did you, Colfax, did you log in with another email or something?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I can never remember what email I use, bro.
Email's so antiquated, man.
I'm out. And then on mobile, I signed in with my phone number,
Oh, cool.
which I prefer, actually.
Yeah. Oh, because it texts you the code, and then you just can copy paste the code in.
Yeah, and you don't even have to copy paste anymore because it's just like,
It's
this
in
is
there.
the code from your message. It's like,
Oh.
don't even send me the code then. Why are we doing that? Well, you already know what the code is.
That's true. Don't make me tap.
Why we tap it?
So the chat wasn't appearing for me after I logged in, but then I refreshed and then it started appearing. I'm sure you've tried, John, but have you tried refreshing?
Oh yeah, I just refreshed it and it's back.
Oh, nice.
Also, the Mr. Frank username, when it was Anon, it was just Anon until I heard you say that, and then I had to refresh it for even to show up as Mr. Frank. I feel like I want to change that.
I don't think I had to refresh for that myself.
Weird. Okay.
I don't think I refreshed.
We're testing bugs. We're testing bugs live, baby. That's what we do.
Yeah, and I also just refreshed and my chat is not showing up anymore. Do we have like a concurrency thing? It's like only a certain number of optimists can view.
I don't think so because it's built from scratch using the database. It doesn't touch the live blocks like cursor thing at all, which I would assume we would have a concurrency thing there since it's not a paid plan.
Interesting.
But it would be interesting. I got to look at that.
Also the video, I'm noticing if I go to HireZip right now, our Google, the background is still moving with the HireZip, but our videos are frozen in Google.
Shit, bro.
Yeah, I'm seeing that too.
Is it moving now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I have to stay in the live streaming software, it looks like. I cannot see.
I put a mute and unmute button in the top nav now. So if you refresh too, you should just be able to
nice.
click that. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Ah, lovely. Wow. How nice.
Nice.
Well, fucking good work, gentlemen, by the way, for getting this thing to where it is today. It's amazing.
props to Brian. I'm just on the bug squashing last minute.
Hey,
which is important.
someone's
bro.
got to do it.
Yeah.
Someone's got to do it.
Yeah, this is exciting.
It's it
There's
feels good.
There's actually people in it. It's working mostly.
We take mostly around here, bro.
Yo,
Hey, how's it going?
What's
Good. Welcome,
Hey.
Cassie. Thanks for joining us.
Nice to meet you all.
pleasure?
Absolute pleasure.
yeah, we are the Higher Zip crew. So I'm Cameron Compreni on Farcaster, and then Chamakito is Brian, Colfax is Colfax. John, what's your handle again?
No.
Oh yeah, like knowledge, no, not like
Yeah.
no.
Knowledge, no.
No, he's not going to tell you.
Yeah, and we're live, by the way, on Higher Zip, so it's streaming. Awesome. And yeah, we do these every week, but you know, we're really excited to chat with you because there's so much happening with Farcaster. And I feel like among all of the contributors to Farcaster, you have some pretty insane lore. And so I like even just maybe like rewinding the clock and like starting there and then kind of the journey from there to like where we are today on Farcaster, I feel like is useful because also a lot of people are kind of coming back to Farcaster to try and like see, okay, well, what is happening here? What's going on with Nanar? What's going on with Quorum? And so, yeah, if we want to kick things off with like a little history from your perspective and like the evolution, I feel like everyone would love to hear that.
Yeah, so I'll actually start a little bit further back before Farcaster. Oh God, it's been a long time now and I have lost track of years. But a long while ago in a galaxy far, far away, I had started a educational series teaching people how to code at the scale of like, FANG caliber companies, obviously before the days that we had LLM tools that could spit out practically everything. And I had a lot of friends that were either just getting started in the space of software engineering or they were trying to actually get a foothold in the industry in the first place. And one of the things that they always came to me, because I love to teach how to code, was how do I actually, how do I ramp up? How do I go from, the hello world and basic data structures and algorithms to massive scale engineering for millions of users? And I mean, that was obviously tempered with most of the time you don't need it. But when you do, here's the types of strategies that you would employ in order to build those kinds of things. And so I had this stream going for quite a while and, people watched it and we were trying to tackle things through example. And God, I can't remember the exact year, but there were some rumors that Discord was going to be acquired by Microsoft. And I don't know if there was actually ever any truth to those rumors, but we decided to take that opportunity to be like, you know what? Okay, let's rebuild Discord from scratch. And that became the primary focus of the stream from there on after. We were tackling all the different problems, like everything from user management to massive databases that can actually, handle millions of simultaneous users to even basic things like QR auth flows and how to make them secure, something that Discord still hasn't done. And so from there, it started to become real enough that I was like, wow, this is actually turning into a viable competitor to Discord. So why not just launch it? And so I was, talking about it, blogging about it, posting about it on Twitter and all sorts of places. And along that, there was a reality check that I had to, reach. When you build a social media app that reaches any modest kind of scale, you immediately start hitting real world problems with not systems, but people. And so some of those get reflected in the way that a lot of these app stores have rules and the way that server hosts like AWS dictate how you actually manage these things. They've basically shifted the liability from themselves, because understandable, to the developers. And by consequence, there's a lot of problems that you have to solve with content moderation, things that you have to solve that if you have access to what's being posted, you have to kind of like preemptively take action or everything gets blamed on you. And so from that, I realized two things. One, Amazon is a problem. Like Amazon is not a viable substrate to build such a Discord clone on. If you wanted to scale out, not have to spend a lot of money on infra and tackle those issues. The other side of it was that app stores, they kind of have a loophole. Like their loophole is basically, if you encrypt everything, then you can actually bypass a lot of the moderation rules that they tend to impose because you can't see the content. So instead, you have to rely on a lagged, like user provides all that, and then you have to react afterwards and all that. But it's a lot simpler. And so I pivoted to turn it into a decentralized Discord clone, basically learning the lessons from crypto and how to make that work, and also made it end-to-end encrypted. I do a lot of cryptography stuff, and I'm sure people have seen enough of that spiel to know that at this point. But long story short, I came up with the first constant size, regardless of number of members of a group, encrypted group messaging encryption scheme that was basically like double ratchet for Signal, how they do, person-to-person communication, but scales up to groups without having to incur the cost of sending an encrypted message to each user individually. But keep the same security guarantees, to be clear, because there's easier ways to do it, but you lose a lot of the secrecy guarantees that come with it. And so through all that, I was blogging about it, posting about it, and then Varun reaches out to me. This was like the early days of Farcaster, and he's like, "Hey, I've been seeing what you're posting, and I really like that. Do you want to talk to us about what you're building?" And at first, I thought maybe this was
one question on that. Sorry to interrupt, but at what point were you posting that on Farcaster already, or was that somewhere else and you happened to see it? Like, how did that?
Yeah, so at the time, Farcaster had, I want to say about 500 users. And so Varun reaches out to me on Twitter. And so I'm like, yeah, sure, let's talk. I didn't know what it was going to be about, but it was at least interesting. And at that time, I was working at Coinbase. And so I jumped on a call with him, and it became clear it was more of a recruiting call. And I'm like, I kind of want to build this. And so we circled back about 3 or 4 months later, and there was another conversation. He's like, do you just want to do a work trial at the team, see how things, work out? And you can start doing some of the stuff that you've been doing, but do it on Farcaster. And I'm like, okay, so you guys have investment. You want end-to-end encrypted messaging. That's kind of dope. I can get down with that. I really don't want to continue working for Coinbase because everything is moving on to Base, and I fucking hate Base. And so that was my mental model at the time. And so
I'm gonna put a pin in that. We gotta come back to
pin that. Yep.
The Base critique. Yep.
And so I was like, sure, let's do it. And so around October 2022 at Coinbase, I gave my 2 weeks notice and jump ship to Farcaster. And so from there, we were building out, some of the early stuff. I was user 1,325, was a huge evangelist, bringing on lots of people to join the network and building just cool shit. And so the early days of Farcaster was really open. It was open protocol development, small team, trying to just do things on a kind of centralized level and then turn them into decentralized primitives as we figured out how to translate those and not lock ourselves into it too early so that we end up in the scenario Ethereum, for example, has a lot of architectural debt because these things ossify. And so, yeah, that's about how I got into Farcaster and where that began.
And as an example of ossification on Ethereum, would you what would you say the ERC20 token standard, or even more deeper under the hood, and what, just to contextualize that a little bit?
Sure. So I've been in the crypto space since the beginning. I was on the MetSteld mailing list when the Bitcoin white paper was published. Yeah. OG Cypherpunk was in a lot of the communities, always went under a pseudonym. You'll never find me, and I'll never own up to who I was. But
Are you Satoshi?
Look, the answer to that question is nobody should ever answer that question yes or no, because realistically, Satoshi never wanted to be found. Satoshi never wanted to be known. Satoshi just wanted to contribute code and move on. And I think that Bitcoin does better without people knowing who Satoshi is. So Anyway, I was around near the beginning and I saw a lot of proposals in the early days, things like Namechain and the colored coins proposal, and ultimately even Vitalik's proposal for Ethereum. And there were a lot of problems with the initial proposal. And of course, it went through like 6 generations of ideas before it finally stuck. And the problem with the design was ultimately that, it still suffers the central premise of what can't scale about blockchain, which is you have limited block space and you have to do those trade-offs. You have to have a small block in order to have, full decentralization. You have a limit on how much compute can be done in order to keep that constrained. And there's engineering techniques you can use to overcome it, but ultimately the concept of a blockchain is inherently a bandwidth bottleneck. And so a lot of those things they've had to kind of like engineer their way out.
Yeah. I mean, it has been interesting, like seeing like Cosmos and Optimism and all of these different approaches taken. I mean, even before that, what was it?
as soon as the audio. Okay, audio's on now. You can go ahead.
Let's ride.
Audio's live?
Yeah, you're good to go.
Sweet. So, sorry for the interruption for those who are listening. We had some New York Wi-Fi outages. Apparently, Mamdani is rationing to make sure that everyone gets equal internet, and then Brian's internet just shit the bed.
Equally shitty internet. That's what we're doing.
Okay, so where we left off, Cassie, you had left Coinbase. You were talking with Varun. He asked you to join Farcaster. You were like, I don't know. Then 4 months later, you join. You start contributing. What's that like?
Yeah, so I really like their approach that they had near the beginning, and they kept it for pretty much the whole history of Merkle, which was like, you know, a 1 week to sometimes 2 week work trial, so you can actually get to understand how people work as developers and think through things. And you had a lot of autonomy, which was really nice, which meant like, you know, you had the option to work on what you wanted, ship what you wanted immediately, and it would just be out there. When we had started, hubs did not exist yet, which is the predecessor to Snapchain. We had a very weird, like, quasi blockchain thing going on the back end that was basically like testing out our ideas on how to make this all work. But ultimately, we moved, I want to say, to hubs by like 2023 was when we had actually like really pushed into getting that shipped. And so, yeah, it was kind of cool. I got to work on like traditional backend stuff, got to work on scaling problems as things started to pop up, like Degen showed up, and then suddenly we were inundated with airdrop farmers and had to deal with like spam controls and prevention and all that stuff. Shipping stuff on React Native. I have my own personal opinions about React Native, but to this day, it's still the easiest way to do cross-platform mobile development. But yeah, I basically touched almost every piece of Farcaster, like Farcaster's total infrastructure and applications.
That's incredible. Yeah. I'm going to start recording just as a fallback so we can publish this, if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so I guess when the Degen stuff happened, obviously the DAUs shot up. It was a huge moment for the network. What were what was it like at like Merkle HQ? Were you guys like putting out fires, like scalability bottlenecks? What was happening behind the scenes?
Oh man, you know that scene from Community where the entire room's on fire, and you know, like one guy walks in with pizza and it's just like crazy. It was kind of like that. I mean, we were all working remote, so like you know, Dan and Varun had their LA office, but everybody was working from different parts of the country. So it was just like sheer pandemonium of trying to like deal with the strain that it was putting on our back end. We hadn't really like worked through the scaling problems yet. And we were just getting absolutely slammed by people who had, you know, reverse engineered-ish the APIs from using the web app, and were just flooding us with spam shit, like just constantly posting messages and stuff on every single like high impact user they could find to try to like get engagement bait and try to like get Degen. And I want to say it was like at one point we had about 90% of our traffic was inauthentic and coming from Malaysia. So to like to stem the tide, we actually did a geo block on Malaysia, which like it only lasted a few days while we were trying to sort out the scaling issues, but it was super funny because we had a Telegram channel at the time for people who were developing and hacking on Farcaster, and just a way to get out comms in case, you know, Farcaster went down, because at the time it went down quite a bit. And the amount of death threats we all got from the Malaysian airdrop was hilarious. Like I was doing these crazy photoshops of Dan in like hell, and it's like, I'm gonna find you, I'm gonna kill your mother, and it was so ridiculous that like, look, I've been on the internet my entire life. That's just normal for me. Like I'm accustomed to that shit, and so to me it's just like, all right, cool. But it was
that's so crazy, because it's like, in a sense, if you want to look at it in like, honestly, the most negative light, like Degen is a great project. Cassie has done great things. The community has endured, but it's also like, that was maybe one of the first, you know, incentivized distributed denial of service attacks, right? You have this token that's being issued to this network of people that are just flooding this infrastructure that isn't necessarily fully, resilient to this scale yet. And when that was happening, where was Nanar at this point? Were they running a hub? Were you guys like working closely with them? Because I know that at some point Nanar runs a hub, Merkle runs a hub, and that was kind of it, right? For a long period of time. Was that already happening around that time?
That's actually tough for me to say because there was so much going on all at the same time. I can't quite like remember the exact timing of events. But what I do remember was at least the early days of Degen. I think we were building hubs. I don't know if they were like, if everything was fully moved to it yet. I just remember that the back end like nightmares we had to deal with were quite extreme. At the time, so this might be a little bit of a history lesson for those new to Farcaster. Nanar actually started out by building a client. Like they built their own Farcaster client. It was called Nanar, and I actually never used it. And it's like not meant to cast shade or anything. I never used it. I was busy hacking on Farcaster under Merkle, so like I just didn't bother. I want to say that we did have hubs running at least through definitely through the story arc of Degen itself. And during that time, we started out with basically what was a permissioned like protocol. Basically, if you wanted to run a hub, you had to be one of the like personally vetted hub runners. I ran a hub like outside of Farcaster, and me, like I'm very much a decentralization maximalist, so I wanted us to get out of this centralized hubs paradigm, and to their credit, like we did. Like our goal was just to do like permissioned to figure this out, and then once we were confident that it could work permissionlessly, then we just opened it up, and anybody could run a hub, and all the nodes would sync with each other poorly, but they synced with each other, and we started to figure out the real problems of how to scale out a CRDT based synchronization primitive. And that was a fun engineering problem, but it was also very revelatory. Because like social media doesn't have to be strict global consensus like a typical blockchain. You don't have to care about which message came first. Usually, it's not
like a double spend problem.
Exactly. But what we were hitting was intrinsic scaling limits as people were running hubs, despite the fact we even added a, say yes, you're accepting that there's no tokens here if you run a hub. People were still like, there were YouTube channels in Hindi, there were YouTube channels in all sorts of other languages, a lot of Eastern European folks who were just saying like, if you run a hub, you're gonna get a secret airdrop soon, so run a hub. And so we were just getting like absolutely slammed with a bunch of like poorly managed nodes that were basically putting the network under a lot more strain than we needed. And so it was an interesting battle, but it revealed that even when you don't have an incentive mechanism, if people even get a hint of there being one, you're gonna hit those same scaling problems either way. And so that kind of forced us to go back to the drawing board. We were thinking like, okay, well, hubs aren't going to scale. Like we cannot make this scale. It was written in JavaScript originally. We started to move things into Rust and just call into the Rust code in order to do things faster, like storage. But ultimately, like we were basically coming to the conclusion that even if we rewrote everything in Rust, it still wasn't going to scale. So we like threw a bunch of ideas around. I had also been working on Equilibrium, so I had a bunch of ideas from the development that I was doing there to like try to make this actually scale out in a way that could work permissionlessly. But ultimately, like they had some consultants from A16Z who were trying to like push their idea.
No.
And so that's how Snapchain came to be, was basically like A16Z was proposing, here's what you should do. You should use basically a variation of Tendermint called Malachite. It's being worked on by I want to say it was Starkware team. And you guys should use that and then do a permission validator set, and then you can just work your way to permissionless. And because there was the carrot on the stick of we will eventually become permissionless and decentralized again, I was like, okay, we'll work through it and figure it out. Fast forward lots of things that were, we'll figure it out eventually, that just kept getting kicked down the road. I was getting really frustrated. And ultimately, I ended up leaving Merkle in July of last year.
Okay. July of last year. So that's relatively recent, because I always knew that you had contributed pretty substantially to Farcaster, but it was never exactly clear like when that started and when that ended. But it sounds like, that's 2025. So like 3 years, 3-ish years.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I don't fault Dan and Varun for the choices that they made. They have a different, philosophy about how to approach these problems. And it's a little bit more, VC funded Silicon Valley mindset. And sure, like, that's one way to do it. But like the rapid pivoting and like, smallest change possible to A/B test whether or not there's something there that works in a startup that's traditional, but on decentralized protocols, it becomes a fucking nightmare. And like, to me, it was just like, there are real problems. We do have to solve them. They do require like a long-term mindset on how to solve them. And it's just never getting prioritized. And so like, once they started pivoting hard into like the casino culture, I was just checked out.
Mhm.
I see.
I think a lot of people felt that way too, by
Yeah.
the way, just regular users, people that aren't as engaged even as you are, casino culture got a little bit goofy. I feel like they noticed that too. I hope they did, right?
Yeah, I mean, like ultimately, like by December of 2025, like it was clear that strategy wasn't working. They brought in Zinger, and Zinger was doing okay, this is a trading app now. And if you don't like it, it's opportunity for another client. And that just really pissed me off. And so by 2025, like late 2025, I was just like, you know what? Fine. Okay. Opportunity for another client. Let's fucking go. I had been building an alternative to Discord, for all those years. And I finally made it happen in like late 2024 with Quorum on web. And I was preparing to launch Quorum on mobile, which was going to basically be a hybrid. Like it does. It does the end-to-end encrypted DMs and group chats that I had been, working on all that time ago. But also, it is a Farcaster client. Like it can interact. And so I was like, you know what? I've had some lessons learned from trying to build a client myself, on top of also building some of the backend services at Farcaster. And so I was just like, okay, you say opportunity for another client, but it's kind of a farce, because the actual like protocol doesn't support building other clients. If you want to run a client, like build your own, you have to build your own backend, you have to build your own ingestion pipeline, you have to build your own ML tools to construct feeds and all that shit. And so I had forked Snapchain like silently while all this chaos was transpiring. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to solve this problem the easy way. Every client needs Nanar. Okay, so we're going to make this fork compatible with Nanar's APIs. And this was before the announcement about Nanar like buying out.
Okay.
And so I was like, here's how we can solve the problems for building clients. Like we have the APIs built into the Snapchain fork. We can solve some of the other pressures, like all the money's going to Merkle when you register an account, when you buy Farcaster Pro. Okay, so we make the protocol ignore Farcaster Pro. You can just do 4 embeds. You can do long casts. It doesn't matter if you have Farcaster Pro or not. And from there, I was like, okay, identity management. How can we like actually decentralize identity management? And so I had all these different FIPs, and then I also sent a PR in addition to the proposal to like decentralize the actual validator set. I sent a PR.
To add your own node, right?
Yeah, in November of last year. And Varun was, he responded to it and he's like, yeah, absolutely, we'll add you. It's just, it's coming up on the holiday season. A lot of people are going to be out, and let's talk about it after the new year. And I'm like, yeah, that's reasonable, because we usually had a week off in December and a lot of people would go on vacation and stuff. Okay, cool. Fast forward to January, where I'm on GM Farcaster talking to Naunish and Adrian, and middle of the broadcast, I hear the news about what that quiet period at Farcaster was all about, and it was that Nanar was buying them out. And so like they wanted to get like a first take from somebody who had worked for the Merkle team. And I had 2 thoughts primarily. One was, okay, Dan and Varun, when you hired me in the first place, you guys said, what are we going to work on for the next 10 years? And can you commit to that? And I was like, sure. And so my first thought is, what happened to the next 10 years, Dan?
Zing.
Love that.
And then the second thought I had was like, you know what, Nanar has actually been a genuine, like, you know, steward of making client development easier. And I mean, I can't think of a company that made more sense to become the acquirer. Okay, this makes sense. And then we got to when they were actually deciding to make changes to the protocol, make changes to the app. And the very first thing they did on the Twitter account once they got control of it was start hawking App Studio, which I was like, okay, it's a little screwy, but like whatever, okay. And then when they modified the validator set, they added Uno, which I mean, no shade intended to Christopher and Erica on that, but like they didn't have a PR out for adding a validator. They didn't have an FIP for adding a validator. They got added because they had a phone call with Rish, and it's just like that's not decentralized protocol governance. We had a way to do this, and you just completely ignored that.
Yeah,
and so that's when all the drama started.
Yeah. I see. And are you, is Quorum or the underlying company Equilibrium, are you guys a validator now? Has that been resolved?
No. Yeah, that's the fun.
No way.
So yeah, so there's two things. One, they said that they would add our validator later, and other people, including myself, were like, well, what the fuck? Like, why did Uno get in when they don't even have a client that's publicly available? If you want in, you have to actually be invited in on top of it being a private beta on test flight. Now, Quorum's a private beta on test flight too. We're still waiting for Apple to approve our beta, but like at the same time, if you want it in, here you go.
It is a sick beta, by the way, on test flight.
Thanks,
Highly recommend. It has its own nice dedicated mini app.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't know. Check it out. Farcaster.pro. I don't know who registered that, but recommend going there.
That's sick.
But it was weird, and so a lot of people were like, "Yeah, this is kind of screwed up." And so then the public statement was like, "Okay, cool, fine. We'll add you before the next update goes out." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." 12 hours later, I get a message, like a DM from Rish, and he's like, "Yeah, we're not going to do that," because. And his justification was that because we were running a fork, we weren't running Snapchain proper, we were running Hypersnap. And he was like, it's too much effort to try to figure out like if it's compatible or if it's going to cause issues, and we don't want to have to troubleshoot it. And I'm like, well, first off, I helped build Snapchain. I know what will work and what won't work. Second, we're committed to staying compatible. And third, I know how Tendermint works. So if our node fails, it's 2/3 of the validator set that has to be, or sorry, 1/3 that has to be screwed up before it causes problems. And 1 out of 6 is not, or actually 1 out of 7 is not going to mess things up. That's our problem to solve. And after a long amount of back and forth and a call with Rish, ultimately he was like, okay, fine, we'll talk. We'll get Manon to talk to you about it, and then we'll get you added to the validator set as long as you're committed to, like, you know, staying compatible and all that. And I was like, great, okay. And then apparently in the last developer talk, or, you know, dev call they do, they were talking about adding another validator. I don't know who they're talking about, but it's not us.
I'm sorry to hear that, and I'm holding out hope.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, like, you know, it's funny because basically every major feature that's been shipped since Nanar took over, like fixing the memory leak issue, they pulled from Hypersnap, fixing the, like, you know, instead of having to use the contract to add a signer, they literally implemented the FIP that I provided. Like it's been really funny because like outside
it sounds like you guys should be collaborating. Like it sounds like
that's
you
why I
have
was like,
a lot of expertise.
Yeah, I'm not understanding, like, and I'm not the most technical, but I'm really not understanding why Quorum is any different from like the Uno perspective. It seems like cherry picking, right? Is that kind of what you're poking at there?
I mean, I'm not gonna speak for them. I'm not going to, like, you know, try to suggest any conspiracies, because I think that conspiracies are generally dumb, and reality tends to be a lot more mundane, at least in general. Like Epstein, outstanding as an example of conspiracies turning out to be right. But in reality, no, it's just like you got a bunch of different pressures, you have different priorities, you got to handle those in whatever order makes sense to you and your company. Okay, fine, whatever. But like, it is kind of funny that they've been cherry picking the changes that, you know, benefited Snapchain and benefited Hypersnap. And it's just been like it's been a one-way direction. And so we stopped contributing FIPs to Farcaster XYZ. Everything has been under Farcaster.org on GitHub. And I've called out the irony of, them being what they would try to position themselves as the champions of what Farcaster should be when they have none of the original protocol dev team. I know they have the Clanker team, but like they did work on some things with Farcaster, but that they weren't the original protocol dev team. They didn't do anything to anything to Snapchain. And so it's just like, oh, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to go ahead and do this fork since you told me to do the fork anyway. And we're going to continue to grow the protocol because we're, at the very least, we have the same goal in mind, which is to grow the user base of Farcaster. Reach said something about the idea of like 10x in 2 years or something like that. I can't remember. It was close to that. We're trying to ramp that up as fast as possible. And so to that end, like, we talked about the token as part of the like proof of work, like decentralization of the protocol so that it's actually permissionless. And that suddenly got a bunch of old users interested, and they've returned from 3-6 month hiatuses, and people will like try to draw any kind of meaning out of that as that they're like they're here for the token or whatever. But like the reality is that like the moment, and you can look at it on the Dune chart of Farcaster's daily active users, the moment that people actually heard the news that there is a token coming, it instantly like ramped up the daily active users. And the ratio of quality users to like low quality airdrop farmers and stuff actually increased in favor of quality users. So it's not as black and white as the stated like, oh, somebody said there's going to be a Farcaster token, and so now we're getting flooded with spam and shit.
Well, I mean, if you think about it from just the first principles of like Web 2 social media and the parasitic relationships that the platforms have with the users, it's like, I think we can all agree we want like a user-owned network. And the way that that's defined is kind of unclear. And that past attempts to define that have resulted in it getting botted to hell, which leaves this negative taste and also kind of paves the way for, future opportunists to try and bot the system. But the underlying frustration with Web 2 social, it hasn't changed through all of that. And so like, it makes sense that people want this, good and bad, right? And so, yeah, I guess I just like, I think that is all like super useful to kind of get us to the history of like where we are now. And then I think, I've read the FIP. It's for proof of work tokenization. It covers a lot of ground. And so maybe, yeah, I guess, there's three broad areas, right? There's like the sort of data availability side, there's the growth in the network side, and then there's like apps, right? And so I guess maybe could we start with like, how did you identify sort of these three? Do you feel like it's expansive or inclusive of like all the core functions of a network? Maybe could you just talk us through your process in getting to those?
Yeah, so thinking about it from like what problems are we trying to solve? Like the core problem is we want to grow the network. What do users actually want? And one of the frustrations that a lot of users have expressed is that like, hey, I have a limited number of casts that like once I breach that, my old ones disappear. Users have a limited number of reactions they can make. Once they've passed that, their old ones disappear. So you can go look back in time at casts that had a lot of engagement, and now it shows like 0 likes on them when they previously had, like 400 to 500. And I just beg to fucking differ that like recording a single like unsigned int of 64 bits is too much of a burden. And so like I was thinking from like, okay, what's wrong with Snapchain other than the decentralization problem? Like what's wrong with Snapchain? And one of those things is that like, okay, well, we're pruning content. And so when you look at what it takes to run a Snapchain node, it requires a lot of storage because it keeps all block history. It doesn't prune blocks, which means all that like data, all those casts, all that information is actually still stored on Snapchain nodes. And so I was like, okay, well, what happens if we take the shackles off? Like, we want to stay compatible with Snapchain so we can validate the roots. So we store things and we prune things on the Snapchain compatible storage side, but we keep it on the Hypersnap side. So that way we can keep the entire history of reactions and casts and all that. And so users can use it like they've used any other social media app before. So you have a storage problem, which means that in order to solve that problem, you need to have like a decent amount of data availability. Now, Farcaster's still young. So like we're dealing with a total of like, I think right now it's like 500 gigs of total data, including the entire block history.
That's it. That's not a lot.
Yeah, and part of that is because we're not hosting the image content. A lot of that is stored on Cloudflare. If you're using the Merkle / Nanar APIs, that's stored on Cloudflare. And that's fine. On the Q side, the way that we handle things, like we scale out massively. Like we have a decentralized storage engine that spans across, tens of thousands of workers. And so for us, like data storage isn't an issue. We've been solving that already by having an S3 compatible API that's decentralized. Okay, cool. So when you use Quorum, you can store the data on Q, and that flows in by not having to worry about storing it on Farcaster. So all you care about is the plain text data of casts, of reactions, and all that. Great. Okay. So the data availability problem, it's not intense yet, but when we do ramp up to potentially millions of daily active users, that's a lot of data. And so gotta incentivize actually holding on to that data, proving you're holding on to that data, and not like cheaply replicating it amongst a bunch of Sybil nodes and all that. Okay, so now you have the Sybiling problem.
Well, just on that real quick, like as a comparison, right? There's like older decentralized networks like Mastodon, for instance, is one that comes to mind. They operate like, it's sort of like a hub model, right? Where it's like you kind of like it. I guess from your perspective, are there like fundamental scaling limitations that they run into, or it's just not decentralized, or it's like a federated network? Like what's the trade-off being made there?
I draw a sharp line between what are federated models and what are decentralized models, and it's a bit of a nuanced debate because some people would argue federated is decentralized. I would disagree because essentially when you run a Mastodon server, you are responsible for hanging on to all the content that your server cares about replicating. And other peers can choose to replicate that data, or you can actually modify your node and it won't replicate data back. There's no like shared algorithm that ensures data replicates across the network, which means that you run into censorship problems. For example, if somebody runs a Mastodon server in Germany, they are subject to German social media laws, which means that there's a lot of things that, for example, in the US is completely legal to talk about, whereas in Germany might qualify as hate speech and they have to censor it. And so by consequence, you run into what essentially turns into a political problem. You have people who have established fiefdoms in their federated nodes, and that can be fine. Like some people like that, and that's good for them. Other networks like Blue Sky, for example, they like to claim that they're decentralized, but when you actually look under the hood, and you can take a look at the engineering work from the Black Sky team, because they're trying really, really hard to
Sky. What a rebel name.
They're trying really hard to actually take the authority basis of what the Blue Sky team is doing that centralizes the protocol and trying to decentralize it for real this time. And I have a great deal of appreciation for what that team's doing, despite the fact that I'm not generally sociopolitically aligned to the Blue Sky crowd, mostly because they hate crypto and AI. And I think that that's a really stupid, like, quasi-religious debate at this point, but regardless, they are trying to solve the clear centralization problems of how the content delivery network works, how the user authentication works, and actually porting your accounts around. Okay, cool. All that is still very centralized in comparison to what the intent of Farcaster is. Now, whether or not they've actually met that intent is a different story. They haven't, because at the end of the day, the contracts do live on a theory. Well, they live on optimism, which is, well, okay, my opinion, not decentralized, because it's just literally a single sequencer. But at the end of the day, it does roll up to the L1. You can make your arguments there. I don't care. At the end of the day, it does live on a substrate that is not controlled by Nanar. But they do have the keys. They do collect the revenue. They do have control over all of those things. So I've
long wondered, who owns the FID registration proceeds? Because as far as I'm aware, it's never been like put to like a social use, like kind of community incentives or things like that. Like it's never been transparent, like how that money is handled or how it will be handled.
Yeah, and it got really bad with Farcaster Pro because that was a lot more money. Like that was $120 a year. And ultimately, the answer is, at the time at least, that went to Merkle. And now I work for Merkle. I don't even know if I'm bound under an NDA anymore because the company doesn't exist except in a kind of zombified state. But I don't think they would mind the fact that I'm confirming they were telling the truth. They were telling the truth that they literally did apply the proceeds of Farcaster Pro to developer and user leaderboard rewards, and it did immediately like completely drain all of the Farcaster Pro proceeds. That's true. What is tricky about this, though, is that there's no governance, there's no oversight. And in fact, they moved all of the proceeds from Farcaster Pro and all that to a centralized custodian, Coinbase, to hold those funds. And it's understandable why they would do that, because there's a high amount of risk on having access to that much funds with a single private key. I know they had a multi-sig, but like at the end of the day, like, you know, just a few signers get popped and then suddenly millions of dollars could be exfiltrated. Okay, understandable. Put it on Coinbase if you don't want to deal with that. Fine. But nevertheless, the fact that it even works like that is a problem to me, because that means that every other client's at a disadvantage. When a user onboards through another client, Merkle got paid. When you're wanting to do, you know, feed generation, when you're wanting to do all the normal things a client would do, either Merkle's getting paid, Naynar's getting paid, or you're spending a lot of money yourself anyway to build up that infrastructure. So those were the problems that I wanted to tackle with Hypersnap. I wanted to fix the actual like centralization, like critical points, like the failure points that exist currently in Snapchain today.
Got it. And so the Snapchain model, it is really trying to not be sort of like politically tied, right? I feel like in the financial world, it's like the same thing as, are you a money transmitter or are you like just like an agnostic node operator? And so the design decision being made by Snapchain at large, not specific to Hypersnap, is let's be neutral here. And then you're saying like, okay, now we need to add incentives to actually run this infrastructure and like measure like, are you actually providing data availability when people want to access data? And like, if so, like what is the reward there? So maybe talk a little bit about like, yeah, like how did you end up kind of coming up with that reward scheme? Is it kind of based on like how IPFS handles it, or Filecoin rather, or like other sort of data availability like blockchains out there? Or
so the reward mechanism, the split between data availability, apps, and user growth, all of that gets resolved per epoch on Hypersnap. The actual data availability proofs, if you go all the way back to, because originally I built data availability proofs on Q. And so that data availability proof approach, it is inspired by Filecoin. Filecoin has its own problems. There's other networks like Chia, they have their own problems. People have figured out how to game those, how to optimize the shit out of their miners to do them. They've, you know, it was proposed to use the Veselovsky VDF to try to prevent GPU or ASIC-based speedups that would, you know, potentially advantage really large-scale operators. And unfortunately, they've fallen short on that. And part of that is the way in which they use those primitives. So Q did something different. Hypersnap's doing something different that limits the ability of somebody with a massive GPU farm trying to, you know, take advantage of any sort of gaps in terms of the intent of the protocol. But where it gets really interesting, and I think that this is one of the most powerful primitives that, I mean, Q doesn't even have this because there's no way to measure that in our case, but on a social network, you actually can measure the honesty and integrity of a user. Like that's our entire, like the retro rewards is calculated algorithmically. We don't do any special machine learning. There's no human tagging involved. We use eigentrust to basically like calculate the set of relationships between users and determine how authentic is this user, how are they behaving. And it's interesting because one, it doesn't require a lot of compute. You can run it on like the lowest grade of hardware, even on the entire history of Farcaster's protocol data spanning back years, in about 2 hours, just to bootstrap the initial set. And then every epoch afterwards is instant. And so from that, not only did we figure out like how to properly reward user growth, it gives us the ability to properly assess whether or not a user is a spammer. So Merkle's spam scoring system, which Nanar has taken over. I don't know if they made much
The
modification.
0, 1, or 2 thing. Is that
Right.
yeah.
Nanar score, all sorts of other systems out there. They're putting these really intense like ML driven regimes to try to like classify users, and a lot of users get screwed because like, for example, Charlie or What Rocks. What Rocks is right now labeled as a spammer. Like they are tagged as a 0. And there's no reason for that. And our evaluation metric does not classify them as a bot. It properly classifies him as an authentic user. And so by having this approach and having this score, I know you wanted to talk about data availability, and I'm going to tie it together here.
This is great. Keep going.
Having that approach and just a basic transparent algorithm, that score actually feeds back into how validators get registered in the first place. So in order to register as a validator, you're limited to 3 total nodes per FID. And there is a bar based on that trust score of the user on whether or not you can even enroll your validator. And that is, again, transparent, trustless. It doesn't require like the approval of some intermediary, but it helps, mediate against the problem of 1, sibling the network, and 2, overloading it with too many validators while we're trying to scale out the underlying like consensus primitives. And so
that's fascinating. So if I could just interject there, like, because I'm just getting up to speed with a lot of this. Running a validator is tied to an FID, which is tied to a reputation and that reputation isn't purely technical. It's also, you're saying it has like a social element. It's based on this eigentrust scoring. So it's
kind
all
of think of it as Google's PageRank almost.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Wow.
And so it's really cool because like instead of having to do these super expensive ML pipelines based on what users are saying and try to like, do a very fuzzy analysis, you can actually just lift out from the data directly. Like one of the things that we uncovered was a massive spam ring that nobody else had seen. In fact, Farcaster marked all the accounts as 2. And these users, probably just one actual person, is operating a farm of like 50,000 users, and they're all interacting with each other, but they're interacting with each other in a ring. Presumably they're trying to do some sort of airdrop farming. This was back in the era of TBA coming online before they just abandoned Farcaster entirely. And so like, I assume they were trying to farm the base airdrop, but regardless, how they were doing it was just like, even with a simple algorithm in terms of all the complex options out there, immediately like sticks them out like a red glaring sore thumb. And so it's
couldn't be more obvious. Yeah. That's incredible. I mean, okay. So I guess stupid question to rewind. So there's the Hypersnap node, which right now is Snapchain compatible. There's extensions being made to it. Are the extensions themselves like an actual ledger that what's going on there?
Yeah, so if you go back to Snapchain itself, like I said with hubs, we had scaling problems because we didn't want to do strict global consensus. There was no need to. But ultimately, we actually did run into problems where we kind of did need them. Like, for example, the FID contracts, the key registry, all of that was on Optimism because we didn't have strict global consensus. There was no way to actually handle user onboarding and registration without something that had it. And so Snapchain was basically created as an answer to the times where we did need it. And for the times we didn't, we could partition the data sets out so that it could be replicated by different sets of servers, so it could scale, horizontally without having to think too hard about the ramifications, because for there, it didn't matter as much. And all of this like flows upstream. They basically copied Near, the Nightshade algorithm they use for consensus, basically adopted Near, except they used a different partitioning scheme. Near had adjustable shards that would fan out based on the amount of traffic volume happening at any given time, whereas Snapchain had a dedicated set of shards. There was shard 0, shard 1, shard 2. And shard 1 and shard 2 was literally just the most basic partitioning algorithm that you learn in like CS 500 level courses, which is take the FID, modulo 2.
Not it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how you end up in shard 1 or shard 2. Shard 0 contained all the things that we did need strict global consensus on. But since we had the strict global consensus primitive, then there's a block. And so you have each consecutive block on the network contains the roots of all those individual shards. And then you could have whatever kind of sequencing you cared about. So anytime there was something that conflicted, where you needed a decision between data that involved shard 1 and shard 2, you would consult shard 0 in order to have that strict global consensus applied to it. And so Hypersnap's not any different. We're still based on that blockchain primitive, but the distinction and where we're going to be like moving it forward is adopting a much deeper fractionalized sharding mechanism that does not rely on dividing by FIDs. It instead is partitioned based on the overall size of the underlying data set. The basic Merkle tree structure, you can actually just go down the tree in order to partition it out. And it basically self-balances based on how much data is under each section of a tree. That's what we did for Q, except we use Merkle trees, but same concept applies.
Wow. I gotta admit, it's above my pay grade, but I think that partitioning on division is probably not the long-term solution. So it seems like you're onto something.
And I mean, that was a concession even then. Like we knew that that wasn't going to scale inevitably. We were going to have to figure out another way to repartition this, but it's not that hard to just think a little bit further. Like, you know, we already have the data set it's structured in such a way we could just keep subdividing. It's at that point, you're basically getting into like typical Uber engineer interviews. Like the answer to almost every single one of their questions is use quad trees. Like it's not a novel concept.
Got it. All right. So the third thing, because we talked a little bit about growth and user reputation, data availability, applications. So we have a mini app, the HireZip mini app, which this is streaming on there and then also on hire.zip. I've made a bunch of mini apps. I like developer rewards when they were a thing. I was sad when they went away, but I also could kind of understand. What are you thinking about in terms of mini apps and like kind of how you measure them and not you, but rather this system measures them, right? And sort of inclusion in the protocol.
So this is where it gets really interesting and kind of like the reason why there's 3 separate categories for the overall reward system. When you build a mini app or when you build a client, because there's actually a lot of overlap between the two, you tend to rely on a third-party service like Nanar, but you also tend to rely on a few other third-party services. Video streaming, obviously, like I'm not sure what you guys are using, LivePeer or...
LivePeer.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So when you're relying on all these third-party services, oftentimes you're relying on them because the underlying, thing that you're building against doesn't have features to support that. And so for Quorum, for example, we have end-to-end encrypted group chats, which is actually based on the original direct casts FIP that I contributed. And it's a little bit bidirectional in feeding, but nevertheless, like that's the basic idea. When we think about how you build a client or a mini app, there's a lot of things you need. You need a place to store data about the user. So oftentimes you end up having your own like database, like using Supabase or something like that. When you need any sort of like basic computation, you are usually using something like AWS Lambda or Vercel or any other kind of like, serverless hosting provider. And then when you're relying on the content delivery, oftentimes you're having to use some sort of backend to host it, GitHub Pages, S3, Cloudflare R2, whatever. Now, some of those problems are just generic cloud problems. And that's what I, spent the last 8 years of my life building with Q. But some of those problems are actually a failing of the protocol itself. And so how we think about things, like, for example, when you are authenticating a user, like on a mini app or even on a client, you have to do something like sign in with Farcaster, which actually calls Merkle or Nanar's backend APIs and verifies the integrity of the signature. And then it gives you basically a yes or no that the user is legitimate. You're relying on something that's not on the protocol when it could be on the protocol. And in fact, actually, it doesn't even have to really be on the protocol. You just need something to reference for the keys to make them make sense. So putting the signers on protocol, that was why I wrote the FIP. Many apps, when you need to store data about the user, why do we need to incur a cost for Supabase when you could actually just make those interactions data that lives on the protocol? You're basically genericizing the protocol to work with more than just primitive user data. It's now like actual computational needs, basic computational needs, but it's the same kind of computational needs that almost any mini app that's not just a static page will need. And then when you get into the kinds of problems you get for building clients, there's other additional things that the protocol should do to serve those who are building clients. And so from there, we started thinking about how do we represent this data on the protocol? How do we make it meaningful? And on top of it, how do we measure it in a way that can transparently reward those who are building those mini apps, those who are building those clients? And I mean, clients are easy. You create a signer for your client. That immediately gives you signal when they post a cast, when they post a reaction. Those things are signed by the signer key that relates to the FID that represents the app. Okay, that's easy to measure. But mini apps, none of that lives on the network at this time. And so one of the things that's part of the proof of work FIP actually includes embedding mini app interactions. So when you click a button on a mini app, you can actually store the state on Hypersnap. So you don't need a backend for it. You don't need to incur the cost of Supabase. You don't need to incur the really painful egress fees of Vercel. And then from there, you end up with enough data that you can actually measure as a signal, like how much that mini app is meaningfully contributing to the user growth of the protocol. So you have like in the developer awards days, like a good chunk of the top 50 mini apps were stupid things like what's my NANAR score? And they were really popular because of course people wanted to know what their NANAR score was because they thought that they'd be eligible for airdrops, and sometimes they were because of it. But in reality, like none of that would actually be measured as interaction data that means anything material for whether or not that mini app is helping users grow. So for the mini apps that do, like Defense of the Agents or Hire.zip, these things that are keeping people using Farcaster, keeping them plugged in, wanting to like grow and bring more people on because this is cool, this is inventive, this is fun. This gives you an actual measurable signal on top of the fact that it benefits the app developer by storing the data on Hypersnap instead of storing the data somewhere else. And so now you get also these cool composability primitives. Mini apps can use other mini apps data, turns into a flourishing ecosystem out of it. So all three of those things together create this really unique flywheel that's applicable to social media networks.
Got it. I guess I have two points on that. One, like as you were talking through that, like paying Supabase, paying decentralized services, like, I'm a happy paying NANAR customer. I will happily continue paying them. But it's like the thought in my head that you triggered was, well, okay, this could actually be an interesting demand driver for the token where it's like, instead of maybe paying Supabase or paying another sort of centralized company, I could actually just be paying the protocol to natively host this on Hypersnap. And so that's not so much geared toward an app developer earning money, but rather like, an app developer kind of generating demand to use the underlying protocol. And that's always good from like a tokenomics perspective. So I also want to talk about like what other sources of demand you could see in the future, but on the actual earning side from an app developer, how do you see that kind of being measured, I guess? Is it like, for instance, one thing is other currencies on Hypersnap, right? You could measure like transactions happening among users with apps on Hypersnap. Is that something that you envision the chain supporting, like having other assets that people can transact in and like measuring that? Or is it more measuring like this user clicked this button, this user watched the stream, sort of less quantitative, more qualitative measurements of activity?
When we think about like what Hypersnap as a protocol should support, like our focus is not about like additional cryptocurrencies just because like right tool for the job. Like the focus is social data. The token provides a unique primitive, because if we remove the shackles of a storage contract, if we remove like the centralized Farcaster Pro primitive that lets you get some additional features, and instead essentially treat the network's utility token as an alternative means to like signaling whether or not this data should be on the protocol, kind of like how Ethereum has gas markets and it dictates whether or not a transaction can go through at that given time because of congestion. You kind of enter into a similar but like socially oriented primitive instead. So when a user interacts with a mini app and the mini app data is interacting with the protocol instead of having to use a separate backend, you actually are having the users, by virtue of using the mini app, they are paying through fees in order to store that data, but the fees are obviously very minimal. So it's very transparent to the end user. They don't even know that they're having to do that because it's such a small fee. From the perspective of spam prevention, it's also got an additional advantage. Now, this is going to be an interesting question that could be potentially spicy. I'm not trying to like suggest or insinuate anything from it. I have to preface it because have any of you used 4chan? And if the answer is no, I can at least explain, like, there is a board that the creator of XKCD wrote an algorithm for called Robot 9000. And Robot 9000 had a unique feature, which was if a user has already written this exact same post before, regardless of who that user was, since they were all anonymous anyway, that post would not be accepted. And the way that that's calculated is essentially based on the entropy of the post, like the unique fingerprint of the post. And you can do some clever tricks with stemming the words and doing like deeper levels of analysis. Obviously, it's got to be fast on a protocol level, but you can apply that same technique. And so how we have our fee-based mechanism baked into the protocol is if you're a high quality user, you get over the bar, you don't have to pay fees for posting. If you're a low quality user, but the content is unique, you can bypass that restriction and also not have to pay a fee. But if you're just spamming the same shit on every post, like a few users do that some people have called bots, but I actually think it's just somebody rampantly posting, like copy pasting, then at that point, after the first time they post it, it becomes, expensive and it's a burden. And so by doing that, you actually control the spam problem from a fee basis instead of controlling the spam problem from like an ML basis.
That's so interesting. Okay,
fascinating.
because this touches on something that we hadn't really. Honestly, I think actually some people, because we got some questions from the chat or from DMs earlier, like, yeah, what is sort of the utility of the token? And I think you just answered it right there. Like one of the core things, besides rewarding the participants, is also maybe penalizing people that are spamming the system or maybe like have, not established a track record. I guess, is every new user kind of coming in able to kind of cast without restriction initially, and then it kind of gradually gets to that place? Because I could also see that like impacting growth, right? If the goal is, yeah.
So for my POV, like the intention of it is not to be detrimental to a regular human user. Like that is if that happens, then that means that the algorithmic approach failed.
Yeah.
And so like strictly from a quality bar, it's about preventing repetitive, even if they make like small modifications to it, the algorithmic approach still notices that. And all it does is it raises the bar on the overall fee cost. And it's still like very, very small. So like from somebody who's, maybe sending the same message twice, transparent, they don't even have to think about it. From somebody who's spamming it 1,000 times as replies under every person's post, majorly expensive. Like it becomes intractable to do that unless there's some outsized financial gain that comes from it. And very oftentimes the people that are doing that are usually wallet drainers, and that stuff gets squashed anyway because it's obviously flaggable content.
What sort of value would you put on the idea of something becoming majorly expensive, to spam?
Well, I mean, like now we're getting kind of into the adjacent topic of like the price of a token, and I'm not gonna venture into that, but like at least you can think from a utility perspective. Like
how expensive do you think it has to be for it to dissuade somebody? Is it 1 cent per post? Is it $1? Is it a grand? You know what I mean? Like it just highlight.
It gets into more of a question of relativity, and I don't mean like general relativity. I mean like the relativity of a user. Like for example, a lot of the people who are doing airdrop farming and stuff are based in countries where the potential outsized gains that they could get if they get those interactions and get those rewards or whatever it is they're trying to do. It has to outweigh, and that difference, like 5 cents can be a lot for people in that situation. Whereas for like users who are not based in those countries, 5 cents is basically like, it's a rounding error. They don't have to think about it. And so how that comes into play is kind of variable. And
Okay.
ultimately, it's not meant to be punitive. It's meant to be at least like a meter on the road that says stop going so fast.
Do you see it being like I guess the first question I have would be like, is there going to be a registration cost like there currently is, even though it's been dramatically lowered? I think it's like 20 cents last I checked to register an FID. So is that kind of going to continue to be a thing? And then do you kind of see it also, the spam cost introduction being like somewhat proportional to that cost if it continues to exist?
So this is where we're going to get into the tricky side of what it means to be a fork. Because realistically, we have to remain compatible with Snapchain. So if the powers that be over at Nanar are not implementing these same changes, then realistically, a user who's wanting to engage in spammy behaviors would just simply post it to Snapchain, and it ends up, making it over to Hypersnap due to compatibility. The second side of that is around user registrations, which, for today, in order for a user to be seen on both Snapchain and Hypersnap, they would have to be registered as an FID under the OP-based contract. From our perspective, at least my own personal perspective, I can't speak for the rest of the Hypersnap dev team, but I can speak from the perspective of a company that has a client. We're going to subsidize users. Like, we're going to subsidize users joining by basically doing the registration for them on the FID contract and ID registry and key registry and all that until the cost, like the gasless key registry, goes into effect for Snapchain as well. Where it gets a little tricky is we are going to still pursue these things anyway. And so it means that there is going to be kind of a split world perspective at times. Say, for example, and this is the example I like to lead with, because a lot of people are about to face this reality right now, is that like Farcaster Pro, the Nanar team has said that they don't intend to make any changes just yet around it, even if they disagree with it, which I know Rish has personally said he does not like the idea of Farcaster Pro, how it's currently built. Okay, fair. Nobody does. But having a Farcaster Pro subscription lets you post a cast with 4 embeds instead of 2. It lets you add a banner to your profile. It lets you do long casts. And if, on the Hypersnap side, we allow those posts without Farcaster Pro. So when the client is interacting with a Hypersnap aware SDK, what that's actually doing is it's creating 2 casts. One that we can interpret from the Hypersnap side as a Snapchain compatible cast, and we'll ignore that and accept the reality of the one that they submitted to Hypersnap, which means any Hypersnap aware client will show the full post correctly. And then for the Snapchain side, we'll just simply have an embed that handles those problems. Like, is it a long cast? Great. It's a picture of text when it renders on a Snapchain-based client. Is it 4 embeds? Great. We'll compact it into a single photo and show that instead of the 4 distinct embeds. So where we do hit the incompatibilities, that's where we'll do what we can to try to at least be meaningfully compatible, but we will have some things that do break away in compatibility.
Got it. Yeah, I guess on that note, to earn rewards, will people need to be on Quorum, or it can be if they're using Nanar's client, like it doesn't matter?
So if you want to earn rewards as a user, no. You can be in the Snapchain world, you can use Farcaster, you can use any of the clients that are targeting Farcasters, like Nanar's Snapchain world. If you are building an app, where we can measure, like say that your mini app, for example, if it creates a signer, okay, that's a measurable signal we can use for app developer rewards. When that's not the case, then we do have to, an app developer would want to use Hypersnap in order to make those interactions, be eligible for rewards. How that works out is when a Snapchain-based client, for example, say that you built a mini app, it interacts with Hypersnap, and it basically lives in Hypersnap instead of on some standard backend. In that scenario, you as a user, when you're interacting with it on a Snapchain-based client like the Farcaster app, you are basically interacting with a proxy backend that interacts with Hypersnap for you, so that from the user's perspective, from the app developer's perspective, everything seems consistent between those 2 worlds. Now, as a node runner, of course, you have to run Hypersnap to get data availability rewards. If you're building a client, you're probably fine and will get rewards either way. If you're building a mini app, like I said, you might have to be more tilted towards Hypersnap. That's just the nature of the beast on how we collect data and how that data turns into actionable rewards.
That's fascinating, actually. And it kind of reminds me of a lot of your work with Equilibrium, creating this sort of like, decentralized cloud. You're kind of bringing that to mini app developers in a sense, in this. So that's super cool. And that's, as a mini app developer, like that's very interesting food for thought. I've asked way too many questions. So guys, if you want to chime in. Also, Cassie, I know that we're at over an hour now, so I don't want to keep you too long, but this has just been so illuminating for me. But I'm going to hand over the mic to others.
Yeah, I guess I'm super curious about the concept of compatibility, whether you see it as a little bit more of a bridge or a ceiling, because I could see how staying tied to Snapchain maybe helps adoption in a way, but then is there, or do you foresee ways that it could maybe limit Hypersnap? Or limit how far it's pushing, how far you're pushing it, I guess?
A way to think about it is that, ultimately those incompatibilities are engineering problems. And so like, yes, in an ideal world, there are some times where we could just be like, well, if you want this, you got to use Hypersnap. But, again, the goal, we're aligned. Like we want Farcaster as a whole to grow, which means that we can't break compatibility with Snapchain. We have to work around those problems and make them work, which means things like proxy backends to work with Hypersnap data when you're on Snapchain. Things like, rendering casts in a special way to be compatible with Snapchain for users that don't have Farcaster Pro but want to use Farcaster Pro features. To me, that's minimal. Like these are solvable, tractable problems. Where things could get weird is, when we get to a point where Hypersnap starts to have features that go too far beyond what Snapchain has to support.
Right.
Near term, that's not a problem. We're not going to be running into that problem in the near term. And long term, it's entirely possible that Nanar could just simply, say, it worked. Like your experiment has succeeded. So we will just be part of this fork and call it a day. Like that is an entirely possible outcome.
Interesting. Very cool. Very cool.
That
Yeah,
is
like
interesting. Yeah, that from kind of another more high level question, from I know we have some 5-year-olds in the chat, myself included, so what would you pitch to a user like me that I fucking love Farcaster? It's my favorite online community. I love decentralization as well. But I know there are other users that care a lot less about decentralization than you or I do, or most people in this chat. What's the selling point there? How do you convince that individual that Quorum is the right place for them?
So, I mean, at the end of the day, if people are using Farcaster on Farcaster, if people are using Farcaster on Quorum or HeroCast or the Degen app or anything like that, like that collectively raises all boats. And so from my perspective, it's not about client adoption. I care about client adoption in the sense that I want users to have a kick-ass experience. So for Quorum, for example, that's why we have things like group chats that are end-to-end encrypted. That's why we have video and voice calling support. That's why our mini app compatibility is extended with features to help, keep users private. But in the real world, for why people would care about decentralization, most people don't. Most people don't because they don't understand what it means. Like I said at the very beginning, talking about like with Mastodon, a federated server in Germany has laws they have to comply with. And so a user who's based in the US, for example, who posts something that might be illegal in Germany, they are finding themselves censored. Now, okay, we can have our own philosophical debate about whether or not that's a good thing. That's not the topic. But at the end of the day, there will always be these different like rough edges that come into play when reality meets law, and that law pertains to jurisdictions. And so for Farcaster, their servers are based in the US. Nanar is incorporated in the US. They are subject to US law, and with some of their more centralized behaviors, that actually puts a lot of responsibility and onus on them to be compliant with those laws in ways that a truly decentralized protocol doesn't have to be. And so giving users a very broad latitude and freedom is something that can only come from a decentralized platform. And that's why it's important from my perspective. Users don't care about decentralization. They care about what they can do.
Right.
And that's something that, ultimately, if you're using a centralized client, centralized server, you're gonna hit some roadblocks.
Yeah, totally. I full on agree with they care about what they can do. And you breaking down a little bit of the feature set is actually super helpful just for me as far as, why I care, why I'm interested, that is a massive selling point, actually. All those features I wasn't even aware of all of that that was offered with Quorum, to be honest.
So there's a very prescient problem that a lot of people are facing today. And it's really weird how this all happened kind of at once. Like when you look at it, you really feel like there's a conspiracy there, and there is, but it's not what you think it is. How a lot of states have added laws that require identification on even social media. A lot of countries are now pushing for it too. Greece is going to ban anonymity on social media. And this is where I will get political, which is that, anonymity is something that is a requirement for true freedom. Like if you cannot be anonymous, then there's a chilling effect that it places on users. And I think that sunlight is the greatest disinfectant. And I don't mean sunlight as identifying the user. I mean sunlight as being able to have open and broad conversations. One of my favorite people in the world is a man who's a R&B musician, like jazz musician, does blues. And his name's Daryl Davis. His entire shtick is he would go to bars that are frequented by Klansmen. And for the context, Daryl Davis is Black. And he would talk to these people, and he would just sit down and have a conversation, basically saying, how could you hate me when you don't even know me? And through his efforts, using freedom of speech, instead of isolating these people and forcing them greater and greater depths of extremism, these people have now had true, meaningful, authentic conversations that let them see the error of their way and
create the empathy.
Massive positive Klansman robes because of it. So
it's incredible.
Wild.
That's the one thing I get political about is privacy and freedom of speech. And that's one of the things that I try to enshrine. But to that end, because of these laws coming into force, if you don't have a decentralized protocol behind it all, eventually they will force you to KYC. And so that is a strong argument against it, even if you don't care about the rest of it.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. That's excellent.
I have oh, sorry, go John. Go.
I might ask a dumb question here, but from what I can gather, the token is put into use for people who aren't high quality users who want to post. And that's kind of a anti-spam function for the token. What other things do you envision that the token's useful for the average user?
Yeah, so one great example of this, I know there's a lot of people that use this mini app. I use this mini app. It's called Emerge, which does the AI generated images. They're thematic and grouped in that given theme. And it's kind of revealed a style of app on the platform that it fills a user need that other apps out there on other social media platforms haven't quite nailed down. And it's essentially a coin operated vending machine. You put in a coin and you get your image. Forget the name of the Japanese style booths where people would get the Polaroids taken of them and stuff, but it's kind of like that, but with using AI to do it instead. And it's very fun. It's very viral. It has amplifying effects that keep people on the platform and posting the cool stuff that they made from it. And right now they rely on using, USDC as that unit of interchange. But when it's based at the protocol level, they could actually gain more from it because they're producing transactions on network. It's associated with their mini app, and they're rewarded by the users interacting with those mini apps. So it kind of gives you something like, when you look at Roblox with their Robux or Roblox, I don't know what it's called, or Epic with their V-Bucks for Fortnite, like you have an ecosystem of people who are using something that is not actual US dollars, and it may materially have a connection to US dollars, but it's something separate that lives in that ecosystem. And from our point of view, the token is filling that niche. So I expect a lot of applications to be built using that token primitive because it unlocks things in ways that, the restrictions around Circle, the requirements that come into play when you're dealing with like fiat, those go away. And it's also intrinsically linked to the overall flywheel.
Cool. Good to hear your perspective on that. Thanks.
Couple random questions from the crowd. Are you hiring? This seems like a big initiative.
So it's funny because like we do have a team. It's a small team. It's a team of 4 total, but we do have a team, and all of them are working on different things. And I don't mean the Farcaster org group, to be clear. The Farcaster org group is like 13 independent contributors, one of which is from Q, me, and everyone else comes from somewhere else. But Quorum, for example, is a Q Inc. product. Claru, our ML runtime, is a Q Inc. product, and all of that. From our perspective, like we've actually been able to do a shitload with the limited resources we have. We've never taken VC funding. We refuse to. We refuse to entertain any deals with them anymore.
Awesome.
Side warrant? Token warrant?
See, that's the thing. That's the thing. They always want a token warrant. And it's such a weird concept too, because like Q Inc. has had revenue. We have actual numbers we can point at when we talk to traditional VCs. And even the traditional VCs are just like, not feeling it. And it's partly because we have a user-focused perspective that is not aligned with VC timelines or expectations. We're not going to strip mine our users for revenue when it's not like something warranted. Like if we have something users want to pay for, they can't live without it, and they want to pay for it, great. That means that everybody wins. But we're not going to do the shitty things that companies, under VC regimes end up doing every single time. And so, yeah, it's harder for hiring because it means that, we have to stay bootstrapped. So the answer is not yet.
Another person asked, Quorum right now, are you willing to share any metrics on usage, such as like MAUs, for instance?
Yeah, so Quorum's daily active users have been increasing. We have weaker signals. Quorum is a privacy-focused app, so we don't have like amplitude or any of the common analytics tools that we can actually like see exactly. Like, for example, it's really creepy. I don't know if you know this, but when you use the Farcaster app or the Farcaster website, they know everything you're doing on the app. Like you tap on profile, you look at a photo, it'll give you a full play-by-play of how long those things have been. Now, is anyone actually going through that? No, probably not. But from my perspective, like users should be guaranteed privacy. Like if you are doing an action that you do not expect to be seen by the world, it should not be logged anywhere. And so measuring things like daily active users, we have to instead infer. And so to that end, Quorum has had various times through its history, like increases in users. We have a massive user base in China.
Oh, interesting.
And so that user base, like we can measure from external signals, like traffic on the overall network where messages are being gossiped throughout, even though it's end-to-end encrypted. We don't know who's sending to whom or what they're sending. We do know that messages are being sent. And so from that perspective, like we're dealing with hundreds of thousands of messages a day. We have thousands of users. Right now, it's actually peaking to new heights, especially because of all the news about Hypersnap. But all those things that are measurable easily, we don't really have. So I can tell you in more granular numbers, like, yeah, we actually have thousands of daily active users, and that number is increasing. We have, hundreds of thousands of messages a day, and that number is increasing. But those are the only kinds of signals I can give because I legitimately can't tell you anything else. I don't know.
Got it.
Pretty good signal though.
That's
That's
awesome,
a lot more messages than I would expect. That's
Yeah,
impressive.
and I mean, it comes down to fulfilling a niche. Like, for example, users in China.
Right.
China's very, very restrictive about social media. The fact that they even have access to this app right now is probably eventually going to be terminated the easy way, like through an app store or whatever. But invariably we're going to find our ways around that to run it as like a PWA and all that, so that users can still use it regardless. Because I don't give a shit what your laws say. We're encrypting messages. So
Let's go.
Higher, bitch.
yeah,
Hell yeah.
it can be controversial at times, but like at the end of the day, people yearn for freedom, and so like that's our target demographic for Quorum. That means that we're not always going to have like crazy users, like crazy amounts of users, just because sometimes that leads to friction. For example, when you change your user profile, we created a way to unify your Farcaster and Quorum profiles. If you're using the latest version of the app and you go to settings, you'll probably see a modal pop up telling you about that option. Not everybody wants that option. And so unlike Meta, where they're like, we unified all your profiles for you, you're welcome. And people are like, what the fuck? I didn't want my Instagram linked to my Facebook. We make that a choice you have to make. And so that leads to things that your average product manager would say, well, this is friction for the user. Yes, it's intentional friction. That means we're not always going to have the easiest to use product. We're not always going to have the flashiest product. Our care is privacy.
Intentional friction is that's an attractive statement.
Love that.
Yeah.
Some just bingo round of questions. Has the community landed on a TGE date? Is that locked in, or?
I'll put it this way. Yes, but we won't say it, because what happens every single time there is one is you will have a flood of scammers trying to target that time frame, pick a token with the same name, trick people into trying to buy a scam token, and then they get completely screwed. And so when you hear about it, you'll hear about it from like my account on Farcaster. You'll hear about it from me first, and it will be immediate. Like it will just be something that's like, boom, it's here, rather than here's when to expect it. Now, obviously, I have said it will be before FarCon, and FarCon's just a few days away. So I guess you have your answer there, kind of. You don't have the when.
Got it.
Maybe
And
it's today.
maybe it's today.
Right
That'd be
now.
historic if this stream.
Maybe
is
you
on.
already casted it, damn it. I should be I put noties on it.
Do you have something to say to people who are asking, like, is this an airdrop that at Genesis? Like, I guess a lot of people are probably clamoring for like, oh, what's my allocation and things like that. Like, I'm sure it's been kind of overwhelming, all the shit. But did you have like a response to all, like a general response that you want to say to all those people?
Yeah, so airdrops. So when you look at the history of tokens that have done airdrops, generally they're based on like these weird criteria that they've set. Like you've casted, or well, in the case of Twitter, you have tweeted, like retweeted our posts X number of times. You've been like this kind of whatever kind of thing to help the hype wheel, but not actually help whatever it is what their product is. And they also have like these half-assed hackathons where it's literally just people building the like lamest shit nobody will ever use, and it gets thrown away after the hackathon just to get their cash prize. We don't do that. The notion of the token rewards is literally the same rules that the protocol will continue to do after this change on Hypersnap takes effect, but it's applied to the history of data on Farcaster. So you can kind of, I mean, one way to think about it is kind of like a pre-mine, but it's not really a pre-mine because it's the same rules. Like there's no special like, oh, were you a developer or did you contribute to the protocol? No, it's none of that. It's did you help the network grow in the same way that you continue helping the network grow? And so part of it is eased. Like we have, 6 months of tranches, like every single month. Like basically when the token comes out, 1/6 of the tokens are released of the retroactive scoring. And then every month thereafter, it's the remaining 6th until it's done. And part of that is to encourage users to keep posting on the platform. You have to keep engaging in the same way that you have in order to remain eligible. So it's not just a, boom, suddenly you got a bunch of tokens, go do whatever the hell you want with them, bye. It's actually like intrinsically bound to the nature of how like the protocol is expected to continue to grow, and users will continue to use and rewards are based on that kind of metric. That's why it's, when MVR posted the snap, and by God, he's really fast at it. I really appreciate that. But when he posted
crazy, we did tip and allocation campaigns, and he was always the first on it, like creating these interfaces. Just an absolute legend.
Yeah, and when users have looked at that retroactive score, they've been saying like, oh, this is an airdrop. It's not really an airdrop. An airdrop is like,
one-time retroactive. Yeah.
And it's specifically based on some arbitrary criteria that the dev team has done. And they also have an allocation for their VC. They have an allocation for themselves. None of that. It is strictly based on the protocol.
Sick.
And it's only 5 months, is it? 5 months of this
5
token being mined.
Yeah, I mean, it's 6. Like, I mean, it starts, you can think of it as 0 indexed. So month 5 is the 6th month, but after, 5 full months have transpired, that 6th tranche is released.
Was there a reason for that, like, length of time? Because it seems almost, I don't know if it feels like a sprint to you, but like a sprint to get people using the protocol in that time period. But then do you worry about a drop off after that, or? Yeah.
That's specifically why it's 6 months, because our goal is to increase Farcaster's user base at least 100-fold over the course of a year. Like the idea of, increasing user base by 10x in 2 years, like that's not an aggressive growth strategy. That's a maintenance plan for something that's kind of like a protocol or an application on life support. We don't want to increase 1,000 users to 10,000 quality users. We want to increase the user base to millions of users daily active.
Incredible.
And then
go for it.
And then the hope is like after that period of time, some number of those people who came will have enjoyed the vibes or whatever and stay on.
Yeah, and I mean, like you can kind of see the impacts of that. Like with Degen, for example, there was a massive amount of tokens that were released early on, and then that massive release kept going on, and that caused its own conflict and drop off, and people became disinterested. And they had, other things that happened alongside that would occasionally spike interest, but ultimately the tokenomics were designed in a way that, I mean, no discredit to Jacek, because like he did an amazing job handling all the crises that came up, but it wasn't aligned to something that you can measure, something that you can improve and influence on. Like the idea is that like if you can keep at this for 6 months and users will continue to like earn tokens as well alongside the original like retroactive tranche, you end up like continuing to grow the user base, getting more people on board, people get excited and share and spread the word.
Mm-hmm. And is it's a sixth of total token supply each time, is it?
No. So this is strictly of the retroactive pool. The total pool is 2 billion tokens. The retroactive pool is 200 million tokens. So it's 10% of the total supply, and it fits into the halving of the actual protocol token issuance.
So that's interesting. So the majority of tokens will be in that first tranche distributed.
No, 10%.
Oh, and then I'm confused then. So what's happening? Could you say?
Let me try and
a
play it back.
5-year-old.
200 million out of the 2 billion are for what is going to be happening over the next 6 months with these.
On top of the overall issuance of tokens on the protocol. So it's basically applying the halving in reverse for the period of time where Farcaster did not have a token before.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, John.
So when are all the tokens going to be issued, or is it is there a max supply? I haven't read up on this.
Yeah, The max supply target is 2 billion, but like that's continual halving. I think closer to Bitcoin.
Okay. And when do you think that total supply will be kind of all distributed? Do you have an idea of that?
I mean, technically this goes on indefinitely. Like you're going to be getting into fractional units, but so there's Bitcoin in that respect. Like eventually you'll hit the precision limits of your overall decimals that you're working with, but at least for the time being, it's, you know, being halved with every halving period.
So it'll like asymptotically approach the 2 billion. And is the halving period, is that like on the order of like years, kind of similar to Bitcoin, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, you should check out the FIP because the details are present in it.
Yeah,
No, it wasn't meant to be like an insult or anything. It's just like, yeah, like check out the FIP. It explains it a lot better than I could in a like 5-minute blurb.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Thank you for your time. It's been great. I'm someone who stepped back from Farcaster in the last like 3 months. So this is like all it's been really interesting to hear you speak passionately about this. It's kind of made me more excited to get back on Farcaster, which is maybe what you're kind of hoping for with this whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's very clear that interest dropped off, especially once like the casino phase of Merkle really came into play, because that's not what brought people on in the first place. And when you consider how growth was organic, like people were bringing other people on, people are picking relatively like-minded people. Most of people who were brought on to Farcaster originally didn't want a casino. They were really happy that Farcaster was crypto adjacent, but not like degenerate crypto aligned. It got rid of like most of the nonsense that came from crypto Twitter and distilled it into something that was like, one, this technology is powerful and we all appreciate it because of the other things aside from like, you know, potential windfalls. And two, it is basically the only tool we've you know designed so far to address the censorship and scaling problems that exist in what is essentially an adversarial system.
Clip that. That's good. Yeah, Cassie, you're amazing. This has been an awesome conversation. Most of it, like you mentioned a little bit, Cam, most of it's definitely above my pay grade, but to hear the passion behind your voice it makes me feel comfortable about the future of Farcaster, and that's beautiful.
Well, thanks for having me. I live, sleep, eat, and breathe this. Like, it probably drives my spouse insane. Actually, I know it drives my spouse insane because I'm chronically online. But it's, you know, like the way I look at it is like the philosophy of ikigai, like you know, something you're good at, something the world needs, something you get paid for. Well, okay, I'm not getting paid for it, but like something you get paid for, and something that brings you like your own inner peace. You found your reason for living. And I was in crypto in the early days and I got kind of disillusioned by it and walked away. But like once I came back, because that itch never stopped being itchy, I just had to scratch it again. I've just been full tilt on this and I can't think or do anything else.
That's amazing. We're lucky to have you kind of, you know, pushing things seemingly in the right direction. It's fucking awesome.
And like if there is something directionally that you find could be improved, like we're very open and amenable. Like that's why we have Farcaster improvement proposals in the first place. That's why we had them in the first place at Merkle. It just kind of fell off the wayside. So like clients, protocol, mini app support, or any kind of new features. Like we have a streaming primitive in Quorum, but like if that needs to be something at the protocol level, things like that. We're always open and receptive to feedback, as long as, for the love of God, please stop sending me these AI generated slop posts, because I'm losing my mind having to trudge through a 1,000-page dissertation of bullshit.
That's perfect. And so outside of you, if you know, you said reach out, like who else is on this team? Who else can we contact if we have anything that pops up like that?
So GitHub, the membership set, like when you see who's a member of an org, they have to actually identify themselves as a member of the org.
Okay.
And I'm retaining that same philosophy. Like if somebody on the team wants to actually like choose and modify their GitHub profile to show they're a member of the org, great. I can understand why they also wouldn't necessarily want to. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I got a lot of guns. I can defend myself, but not everybody has that kind of luxury, either by country or by creed or just where they are.
Respect.
So, like, you can kind of infer it based on who's interacting, who's posting FIPs, who's submitting PRs, and who can approve them in the first place. But like, I'd still rather leave it to them to personally identify. But like I said, there's 13 different people. They're all longstanding members of Farcaster, and we all have this same goal in mind, which is to grow Farcaster overall.
Perfect answer, by the way.
Love that.
It's apropos. Perfect answer. Well, thank you.
I'm not afraid of death threats. Some people have reason to be.
You won't get them here. You're safe here. It's all good.
Cool. Thank you so much, Cassie.
Yeah,
This
thank you
has
so
been
much.
a marathon, but it's been amazing. And we're really excited for the launch of this.
Yeah,
Like,
really
I'm so
appreciate the
hyped.
depth of everything you've spoken about as well too. I'm going to keep thinking about the incentive thing and like how much it shapes the culture versus growth. So yeah, really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, cheers. Talk soon. See you on the timeline.
Yep.
True.
Later,
See ya.
everybody.
Take care.
God, that was so good. Oh my goodness.
Bro,
I'm gonna stop the recording.
should I go offline or even?
Yeah, we can go
Yeah.
offline.
Peace,
Bye,
guys.
I got to
everybody.
run, but that was great. That was awesome. Thanks for